Welcome, everybody. You are now listening to WCEG Network on WCEGTalkRadio.com. You can watch us on your smart TV now, and we're also on YouTube at WCEG Network. My name is Rev Diane Dougherty. I am a Roman Catholic priest, and I am your talk show host for Take a Stand. With my partner, Demita Chapman, we coordinate our shows every other week. And we interview activists that are interested in expanding democracy in our city, state, and nation. We're the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into our communities. Take a minute, please, and like us on Facebook. You can also subscribe and encourage your network to do the same. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio, and at WCEG Network. The topics we will discuss and opinions are those of the host and the guest, not WCEG. And we all thank you for your continued support. Today, we are going to talk about a new organization called FFRN, Funds for Reparations Now. I will interview two guests. The first is Caroline Colesworthy from California, and she has a very interesting background in that she was born on Newport Beach, California, to a father who's an officer of the John Birch Society and whose mother grew up in the Jim Crow South. She attended Brown University and has a master's in environmental policy. And she received a directive from the Holy Spirit that said, all poverty is not material. Go back and work with the people you are of. So she moved back to Orange County, joined her family business of real estate, where she's a broker. She owns her own company, has two daughters. And when she took a rigid course, an independent study on, of all things, critical race theory, after the death of Philandro Castro, that for her was a primary instigating incident, including the death of her own father that she cared for 7 years. She began to seek healing and wholeness of her own people. And when she found the Fund for Reparations Now, she decided to become of service. So we welcome her tremendously. Thank you so much, Caroline. We also have with us Peggy Dobbins. I met Peggy through the Chattahoochee Brick Company Descendants movement. And Peggy, will you please tell us a little bit about your extensive history in 30 seconds?
I don't know what to tell. I'm 83 this month, so that makes it, that's my 30 seconds. And I've been, I guess, quick way, I've been an academic. I'm a retired academic, a retired activist, and I'm sort of an artist actively.
You are wonderful. I just so enjoy talking with you, and you're a witness to all that you've been refired in your retirement. And your retirement, and your retirement, and your retirement. Vivian, I was wondering if you could make me a co-host, because what I would like to do is share a PowerPoint that I made up that will help us understand a little bit more about what we are about to do. Can everybody see this
Nice.
this PowerPoint? So take a stand. This is its 6th season, and we are welcoming the first part of a 2-part series. We are doing Funds for Reparation Now with Caroline Colesworthy from California and Peggy Dobbins, and we will hear their stories shortly. And October 4th, I will interview 2 people who will talk about the Chattahoochee Brick Company Descendants Coalition, which relates to how we all got together. But before we get started, I think I was telling people about this, and they said, what do we need reparations for? And so it dawned on me that what we don't know has hurt others, and that continues. I found this piece from the Decolonial Atlas, and it took my breath away, because in all of the courses of history I have had, absolutely nothing was mentioned of the massacre of Black people in the United States. When I did go to the Equal Justice Center in Montgomery, I did find out about things that we were not taught. For instance, in Elaine, Arkansas, which is not that far away, here it is, 1919, hundreds of Black people were killed, just massacred. And so we'll be hearing about that through this. The question that is on their website is, are you a white person that longs to heal our community's troubled history with race? And that is why I knew to interview the people here and participate in their initiative that I was in the right place. This is their organization, Fund for Reparations Now. And we are part of a coalition that supports the National African American Reparations Commission. Very important. This is on the website, FFRN website, that we can own up, we can pay in, and we can do better. Because in America, although it might not be us, individuals in the past, in our past, have created systems that keep larger parts of the community out of the American dream and out of our democratic process. I particularly like this, and I hope you'll go to the site to read NAARC's preliminary 10-point reparations program, of which FFRN looks very carefully and participates in certain aspects of this for very purposeful reasons. And so I would now like to hear a little bit from Peggy about how you got into this and why do you think a woman of your age should participate, or anybody should participate in this organization? Why is it important?
Oh, thanks, Diane. And I love that I learned more about Caroline than I knew before, and I've known her for a while. That's wonderful. You're a great interviewer. I knew you were going to ask me that, and I made notes. I've been thinking about it all morning, what I was going to tell you about why I became active again when FFRN asked me to join their board. Here's what I think. I don't know whether it matters to young people today, but you're almost as old as I am. You know, some people watching may share my experience, but I spent years as an activist feeling morally superior to white people who were just slightly more racist than I was yesterday, thanks to the accidental luck of experiencing relations work with Black people who stripped away a few layers of racism. And that's on the one hand. And on the other hand, I also spent a lot of years working with Black people who actually were often older than I, smarter than I, better credentialated than I, better connected than I, but to whom I told what to do. I always felt like I knew better than they did because I was white, they were Black. I wasn't conscious that that was so, but in retrospect, I know it was so. I think about some of the people I worked with and missed the opportunity to learn what I could have only learned if I'd shut up. So when Fern asked me, what is new about Fern? I'm of the SNCC generation, whites who were active in the student nonviolent movement, many of whom were wonderful, idealistic young white people, but we made a lot of mistakes telling Black people how things should be. So Fern, from the beginning, went to the National African American Reparations Commission and said, give us assignments. Fern doesn't decide what reparations is. And I think that's really important today as more and more of the fewer and fewer people who are getting more and more of the US dollars began more and more to take tax write-offs for doing projects to help others, often Blacks, who they decide what is good for. And so I'm eager to be part of a group that begins to set a model that if you're white and you want to do reparations, you really need to subsume your own best judgment to that of National African Americans Reparations Commission.
Peggy, that was wonderfully said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caroline, tell us a little bit about how you got interested in Fern. Were you invited or did you hear about it and volunteer? And what drives you today?
Absolutely. Thank you. As you mentioned, I had been caring for my father and he was passing, and it was a time of realizing that I was going to get a lot of my capacity back. And I had, really focused on family for a long time. And I took it to prayer, until I felt really clear about how to position myself back in, the struggle for liberation, the struggle for environmental sanity. And Spirit was really clear that I needed to work in reparations. I did not know how to accomplish that. I still live in Orange County. We have about 0.4% African American population here. I'm not adjacent to a thriving community of Black people. Segregation did its work here. And what could I do? I didn't know. Talk with Latasha Morrison. She's a white evangelical, she's a Black evangelical woman who works in white evangelical settings to do racial healing work from a biblical context. My best girlfriend is evangelical. So I went and it was cool, but I didn't find my place. I started a project on Instagram that was an art project, dreaming of a post-reparations world. And it's kind of a derelict account now. It's called Reparations Dream Project. It occurs to me that white people not only lack the historical understanding of why reparations are necessary, but dwell in scarcity and fear. And I wanted to show through words and with beauty, you know, what liberation might feel like through little vignettes. And so I would write about Black and Indigenous reparations as if it had already happened, and kind of poetry. And Fern picked me up and said, join the board. And I said, totally, I want to join the board. This is everything. You know, back when I was a young activist, a friend went down to visit the Zapatistas and said, how can we help you? And the Zapatistas said, well, we like it when you come down here and dig ditches with us and buy our coffee. That's great. You're welcome. And you should go home and stop the crazy that is coming from your country. You know, you're from the belly of the beast, and it's your job to go back there and stop the hemorrhage. You know, go back to the people you are of. And I really heard that. You know, they said, we don't actually need help, you know, help us dig ditches. It's cool. We'll feed and keep you. But, you know, and so to me, that really translated to trust Black leadership, trust Black leadership, trust Black leadership. You know, if you want to come help me dig ditches, we've got shovels. Otherwise, get the hell out of the way, you know? And so that's why reparations for me, you know? And since doing the work, I have found ancestrally that I am exactly implicated in what has occurred. You know, I took that on intuition from spirit, you know, that I was raised upper middle class, family from the South. I made a lot of assumptions. And since starting the work, it's been affirmed for me. You know, my family definitely held slaves. And I went to college because my dad was a homeowner, you know, and he got a VA loan, and when Black veterans were not granted VA loans. So there's nothing theoretical about the economic oppression for me. You know, my degrees occurred because he had access, you know. That's really easy. Doesn't mean I didn't work hard. Doesn't mean, you know, that I am wrong or bad. It just means that, you know, I have a responsibility to share what was given to me. And so I'm going to do that.
What an activist.
Don't you think aren't we lucky that this generation has people like Caroline Colesworthy?
And you know, what you speak of is something that I have really believed. It's the spirit that is pushing the boundaries, and those who listen to this spirit, you know, in their heart, they have a sense of humanity that, you know, what has been in the past or created all of the silos. There's something wrong with them, and that we need to push the sides out. And I think that's what Fern is doing. I have a little piece about the Elaine massacre that I'd like to read to the listeners. And then I would like you both to talk about the project that Fern has done as directed by NAARC. So on the night of September 30th, which is coming up pretty soon, there were about 100 Black farmers that attended a meeting of the Progressive Farm and Household Union of America in a church in Phillips County, Arkansas. Many of the farmers were sharecroppers on white-owned plantations in the area, and the meeting was held to discuss ways they could organize to demand fair payments for their crops. Black labor unions, such as Progressive Farmers, were deeply resented among white landowners. Sounds familiar? throughout the country because unions threatened to weaken the power of the white aristocratic power. The union also made efforts to subvert racial divisions in labor relations and hired a white attorney to negotiate with landowners for better cotton prices. Knowing that Black union organizing often attracted opposition, the Black men stood as armed guards around the church while Phillips County meeting was taking place. When a group of white people from the Missouri Pacific Railroad attempted to intrude and spy on the meeting, the guards held them back and a shootout erupted. At least 2 white men were killed, which enraged white mobs that quickly formed. The mobs descended on the nearby Black town of Elaine, Arkansas, destroying homes, businesses, and attacking any Black people in their path over the coming days, not just one day, coming days. Terrified Black residents, including women, children, and the elderly, fled their homes and hid for their lives in nearby woods and fields. A responding federal troop regiment claimed only 2 Black people were killed, but many reports challenged the white soldiers' credibility and accused them of participating in the massacre. Today, historians estimate hundreds of Black people were killed in the massacre. When the violence was quelled, 67 Black people were arrested and charged for inciting violence, while dozens more faced other charges. No white attackers were prosecuted, but 12 Black union members convicted of riot-related charges were sentenced to death. The NAACP, along with the local African-American lawyer, Scipio Africanus Jones, represented the men on appeal and successfully obtained reversals of their death sentences. This was from the Equal Justice, the Institute for Equal Justice in Montgomery. And when I read that, especially when I was learning more about Fern, I was so excited to hear that the fundraising for Elaine Massacre not only had taken place, but that you were working on a project in the city to fund a museum of sorts. So could you talk more about that right now?
Caroline, I joined Fern after the project was underway, but I would like to go on record as saying, as an old white activist who's gotten a lot of credit for being a great supporter of Black equality, I had never heard of the Elaine Massacre. Not only that, my uncle, who made a lot of money as a cotton broker, I'm sure was one of the people who benefited from repressing that organizing. And I never heard anything about that. So I'm really proud to have joined Fern, and whatever led Fern, or what, I guess, I don't know, maybe Caroline will speak about that, of how NAARC happened to pick this as our first project.
Right. Thanks, Peggy. Yeah, when first we started raising money, I'm here, can you hear me? When
Yes, I can hear you, but
started raising money.
your visual is real static. So I don't know if Caroline's.
I tried turning my video off.
Oh, well,
That's all right. Keep going because we're getting the audio.
yes, the audio comes in fine. Just keep talking. You look kind of
Great.
cute jumping around. Okay.
Great. When we first started raising money, it was not determined where the money would go. NAARC suggested a few different projects, and they let us know that they felt really passionately that the money would go toward Elaine, Arkansas. And they told us why. Because it was likely the largest loss of life in America's history as far as a Black massacre, a massacre of Black people at white hands, as well as the implication of this, but this was taxpayer-funded murder. Further, the defense was put forward by Scipio Jones, Black attorney who actually created a precedent that
we've lost Caroline. I did go to
from being held accountable for their
Caroline, would it be okay if you would call, if you would get off of this and use the phone line, because you're coming in and out and the connection is not clear. How does that sound?
Yeah, I'll pick up while she's doing that and tell
Thank you.
what I do.
I'll be right back on phone.
Okay.
What I have learned when Caroline mentioned that one of the main reasons for doing the Elaine project was that it had been supported with that, that the massacre involved federal tax money, which makes it a very appropriate thing to come under the national reparations. Federal troops were called in, and federal troops went to put down what was called a black mob rebellion, which was actually whites rampaging across this territory. Now, I went this summer on the way on a road trip. We went by Elaine, and it's a little town, a teeny little town on the edge of the Mississippi River. On the other side of the river are gambling casinos, and the Mississippi side has gambling casinos. The Arkansas side is just crops, water, and poor people. So I hope that as people will come and make pilgrimages. And I interviewed a white family while I was there, and I think that it's possible that the people who are working on the project there will engage white people who live there in beginning to understand and participate in repairing the damage.
Wonderful. I think we have Carolyn back again. Do we have you, Carolyn?
Yes, thank you.
Great, Caroline. Go ahead and finish what you were saying about the taxpayer dollars.
Right. So not only is this likely the largest loss of life, Black lives, to white violence in our nation's history in one moment, but it wasn't just rogue citizens. Loss of life occurred largely from federal engagement. So it was state-sponsored murder, which makes an important distinction. A secondary reason why the Elaine massacre story is so important to the national narrative is that mostly we've talked about Black sharecroppers. And it turns out that the majority of people in that area of Black people were landowners. So the loss of land it wasn't just loss of access to livelihood, it was actually loss of legal right to property, which is something that, yeah, it tends to get overlooked, misunderstood, not told accurately. And then the third really important feature of the Elaine massacre was how the case was fought with those 12 Black labor organizers. They got off. They were not prosecuted and killed for the massacre because, of course, we heard in the early part of the story, 2 white people were killed. And that really set off the fighting and the amazing force that came afterwards. And so those 12 were on trial, but Scipio Jones, an African-American attorney, was able to create a precedent-setting argument that stopped what had been not only massacre, but then death penalty for the people who were held accountable, for the Black people who were held accountable. So it was a landmark massacre, and it decimated an already small and out of the way community. Unlike Tulsa, which was a thriving place and continued to be a thriving place despite the violence that occurred there.
Fascinating. The complicity of governments.
Yeah.
Is there still an African American community in Elaine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're still poor.
Yes, I don't. Actually, there's a really interesting effort going on there. There's a woman, a white minister who's been very supportive, and I think she's involved in the Methodist Church. And then there is also a community center, and the community center has launched a project to make Elaine the birdhouse capital of the world. And they make these beautiful little birdhouses that the birdhouse store, that was the only thing there next to the building that they hope will be the building that they have a little museum in. But I was kind of hoping that the birdhouses would begin to help fund the continuation of the project, but I don't know that will happen. But they, they're creative people, and they're doing creative things. The very fact that they thought to contact NAARC was just, you would have to go there to get a sense of how impoverished it is. Financially, there's probably a great deal of richness of spirit.
Love it. Richness of spirit. Doesn't put food on the table, though.
Thank you, Diane, Reverend Diane.
Well, what I would like to say is I loved your idea of a pilgrimage. I'm working with a group of Christians for Biblical Equality to go to Montgomery when they come in August of 2022, because I think that we should have these pilgrimages, and maybe not as a church, but maybe just as ourselves. Can you tell us more, maybe whichever one knows more about how much money was raised and who do they give it to, who will oversee it, and how is it distributed? How are those funds distributed?
Caroline, do you know?
Sure. We promised $150,000 and we raised $150,000. We sent that to them in June. They had hoped to break ground on their new center and to begin the growth and rehabilitation of their cultural center and have it completed by the 30th of September. But unfortunately, with COVID, they have not been able to start. And so they're still holding on to those monies, and they're going to use them to make their center what they dream that it could be. $150,000 goes a lot further in rural Arkansas than it does in a lot of places in the country.
Is there any federal funding coming from that, since this was a taxpayer issue? People from the area?
Good point, Reverend Diane. Good point.
I mean, that's the ask. We are asking for the passage of H.R. 40, which is a bill introduced by Congressman John Conyers in 1989 to pay federal reparations to make up for state-sponsored violence. And unfortunately, that's not being as successful right this moment as we wish it was, although it has gotten further than it's ever gotten. It passed out of committee and it's ready for the House floor. If it could be introduced, it has 201 co-sponsors right now. It never had more than 100 after a season. It's a robust number.
What is it, HR? Did you say HR 40?
Which harkens back to 40 acres and a mule. HR 40.
I love it. All right.
That's our bill. And to answer your question specifically, the Elaine Legacy Center has applied for grants, but currently they don't have any other grants. Our money is the money that they have.
To get started. I love it.
Since she mentioned HR 40, I think it's really important that we realize the evolution of the reparation movement. When I came back to the South, I've lived off in the South most of my life, let's say, with periodic sabbaticals away. So when I came back the last time, and this time sort of resolving to try to address, at that time I wasn't even saying white supremacy, I was just saying racism, but I did resolve when I turned 60 to try to work with other whites, as Caroline talked about being told to go home and work with other whites in Orange County. So I went to meet an old civil rights worker named Connie Tucker, who people may know of. And she had been the organizer of SCEF, Southern Conference Education Fund, which at one point was what brought Eleanor Roosevelt to the South. And Connie had, at that time, this was 1996, just at the time of the Olympics, she introduced me to two guys who, and I've spent a lot of time in civil rights movement. These guys were too militant and scary to me. They were speaking about reparations. Now, I think it's significant that in 1996, I, sort of breastfeeding white civil rights advocate, was scared by the concept of the reparations movement. That group called themselves, and they have carried the ball as the National Coalition. I don't know what it spells out as, but the abbreviation is COBRA. And that even their shorthand was scary to me. But that was 96. This is 2021. The reparations movement has evolved. The bill presented by Representative Conyers just called for studying the question of reparations, which, as I just testified, was scary even to white civil rights liberals. It has evolved to now that I think we begin to understand we have to repair. We have to repair. And I guess I'll shut up and hope Caroline picks up at that point.
I'd like to add something to that, Peggy. When I said I was going to work in reparations, my 72-year-old mother, who grew up in the Jim Crow South and fled because of the trauma of white violence against Black bodies, she said, honey, I wish you wouldn't waste your time because reparations is never going to happen. And I said, well, Mama, I love you. I'm going to do my thing. And, 2 years later, she sees that this movement has new life. And she believes, as I believe, that we will see reparations in our lifetime. And what I know about the white consciousness that is still afraid for reparations is this idea of, like I said, fear and scarcity. And it is, am I going to be harmed by reparations? Am I going to be made poor by reparations? If Blacks get up, are they going to do us like we did them? And wow, no. Collective liberation really means liberation for all. We will all be healthier and more whole when we have made these amends in concrete and symbolic ways. We will all be freer. No one is going to experience lack or abuse or deprivation. Our federal government has more than enough to go around. It's a matter of priorities. And, that's my message for white America that is scared by this. It's okay. You're going to be okay. So.
I was just going to raise that whole question. I got a picture from a friend of mine yesterday of the general on his horse, Traveler, because she's very upset that they tore the statue down in Virginia. And she thinks, and I guess it's quite prominent on right-wing radio, that history is being wiped away. That this appeal for reparations is part of a cancel culture. And that's what they are objecting to.
Let me respond to Robert E. Lee.
I can hardly say his name.
Robert E. Lee was the captain who arrested John Brown. And I don't know how in the world he got to be so ennobled. But can you imagine if we had today universities named for Hitler and Goebbels? I have a great aunt. In fact, let's see if I could. She's on that wall. Let's see. I don't know. Anyway, I have a portrait of a great aunt on my wall who started the Robert E. Lee Daughters of the Confederacy, United Daughters of the Confederacy in Mexico City. And the what's going on today, and I think reparations is about it, is as we discover things like Elaine, we're demystifying history. We're discovering things that were lies, and we're discovering things that were facts. And Caroline, your mother grew up in the South, but Diane, you didn't. But the things that I grew up actually believing are just horrific lies that covered up things I'm just terribly embarrassed and ashamed to know about my ancestors. But that happened. My grandfather was in the Texas legislature in Waco, Texas, when Jesse Washington was lynched. The things that I guess I want to leap forward and say, if we don't learn that humans just like us are capable of such actions, such wrongs, it's going to go on. It's going to go on. We have to address what it has done, not only what we do to other people, but what happens to us to make us into people who do things like that. Because we are human and we will do things like that. And we are. Our country is doing barbarisms to other people. The prison, I'm very concerned about convict lease now, but that's that's years and years ago. The main reason for focusing on it, which I did not realize when I began, but I just today started reading about prison labor today. Prison labor today is going on. There are, of the 101.51 million incarcerated people in America today, half are employed in some form of prison labor.
10 cents an hour.
10 cents an hour. And as Donna Stevens, whom you're going to interview next, who's involved in the chat, she pointed out to me that, yes, you know, a guy who's making $1 or $1.50 learning how to manufacture iPhones, or maybe not for Apple precisely, but maybe, who knows? The data is not transparent, but there are people manufacturing communication equipment in prisons. They come out, they can't get a job making $30, $40 an hour with Apple, you know, and what does that do to the labor force in general? What does convict labor do? It's the same thing that slave labor has always done to free labor. It keeps it down, it keeps it oppressed.
I call it morphing.
You call it what?
Morphing. It morphed.
Oh, morph.
Slavery
Yes.
by another name.
Or mutates into new form.
Yep.
And when
well, we have about 10 more minutes left, and I really would like to ask both of you, how did you get through your initial understandings, or just non-understanding, to the point where you are now? What have you ever thought about the grief that emotionally has gripped you to move out of those former beliefs into who you are today? How did that impact you? What do you say, Carolyn? You've gone through a lot.
Sure. Thank you. To be really honest, I am a person who suffers from skin picking addiction. And from the time I was about 5, really bad when I was 15, up until I was about 35, was I able to finally get free of that addiction. And that was me harming myself in ways that I could not stop. And so I know what it is to have harm inside of you, and to do harm, and to feel harm. And so never did I say to myself, there's no evil in me, because there always was, and I was powerless over it.
Wow.
And I thought I loved myself, but I continued harming myself. And so, and it's shameful. It's shameful. I mean, I would cover it up with more makeup than you would have time to put on in the morning. And I felt that I was deeply bad and wrong because of it. And I couldn't stop. And just like right now, if we go out and purchase items made with prison labor, that blood is on our hands, just like it was for all of our ancestors in failing to right the wrongs of racial oppression for all of these years, starting with chattel slavery and, you know, morphing multiple times since then. And I don't know that I could have understood I don't know that I could have understood without experiencing that level of powerlessness.
Wow.
And certainly I would never have been delivered to spirit with the willingness that I was if I didn't absolutely have to, because I was in a prison of my own making. Why seek God if you don't have to? So,
Caroline, that's powerful for me to hear that. And I feel like it makes me feel so shallow. I've been thinking in the last few years about compassion. It seems that the people that I respect most, who seem to do the things that I admire and cherish and want to see more like in the world, are very aware of compassion. And I think compassion is to feel as the suffering that another feels. I fault myself. I don't think that I'd have compassion at the level that, for instance, Caroline does. And I have to operate basically on an intellectual basis. It's an intellectual leap of faith that by serving others more is the most I can serve myself in the long run, is the result of serving others more, or serve myself best in the long run by serving others better, serving others first in the long run. I serve myself in the long run. That's a very rational, self-serving, in fact, it's altruism is rational self-service. And that's very different and much more shallow and rational. Reverend Diane is a spiritual leader. Caroline testifies, and I have to say I'm shallow in that regard. So I have to put myself under the discipline of,
Peggy, any which way you get there.
Yeah,
any which way you get there.
Yeah, that's why I judge by effect, not intent.
I love you so much, so much. Well, listen, we have about 5 more minutes. And I want to say thank you for your beautiful witnesses for this interview about an incredible new movement called FFRN, Funds for Reparation Now. This is a group of white people connecting with the African American reparations movement, and we're pushing the boundaries. I have another screen to share about, oops, that was wrong. There we go.
Good.
Something that's happening tomorrow. Tomorrow is an advocacy day, and we've all heard about Elaine massacre now, and my takeaway has always been there's no one to come. It happened because there were no structures. There's absolutely no structures to take care of these mobs that have ill intent. Tomorrow, we are having what is called an advocacy day by Georgians that belong to a group called Fair Districts Georgia. Now, why is this important? This is important because our census was taken, and now we are faced with Republicans who are going to build the next set of districts for the next 10 years in Georgia. And depending on how they do it, there will be no advocacy for Democrats, or future voters that want a say in democracy. And so this group is having an advocacy day. I highly recommend that you get a ticket. It's online. It's a virtual event. And listen to how all of us in our states, cities, states, and nation can participate in democracy by demanding that these districts be drawn fairly. You'll hear about the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. It's a nonpartisan organization that has a methodology. After the maps are drawn, they will apply that methodology to the way it was drawn, and the states and those who have drawn it will be labeled as advocates for the people of the state or against the people of the state.
Wow.
I know. So it's very interesting. It's one more thing. The last thing I want to talk about is mental health, mental stability. All of us who listen to these stories we've never heard, that, like you say, hurt our hearts. I don't know how it impacted you, but when I heard of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and saw that map, my heart was broken into pieces, because so many times in my life, mobs, although not white men taking over physically, beating communities down, they do it legislatively until you are brought to your knees and do not have power. And my constant prayer has been, how, Lord, do we maintain the power of your gifts and your desire to make a people one? And so while I pray, I take time out, regroup, and find new ways to heal my broken heart. To me, this is what I can do with Fern and the African American Reparations Committee. It's a way of healing that which has been broken by those in the past, and a call to raise up those who want to rise in the future. So think about the Advocacy Day. Just one more thing to add to your calendar. Think about, and I'll be talking about it later on. Next, join us on the next session, which is October 4th, where we will hear about the Chattahoochee Brick Company. And I want to say thank you to Peggy and to Caroline. If either of you have anything you want to say in our last few minutes, you're on.
I want to say thank you, Reverend Diane. You're a great Catholic priest. May there be more. And thank you for bringing us through all of this to a point of very practical, immediate need. The gerrymandering must be stopped. I did not know about this Princeton method for defining what is clearly definable for the people or against the people, but thank you. Yes, we'll need to go tomorrow and learn how to stop gerrymanderers.
All right, I'll put that, I'll put the website down.
Yeah.
And Caroline, you have the last word.
Oh, thank you. Please go to our website, fundforreparationsnow.org. Please consider signing our formal apology and beginning to make reparations. And I just wanted to share the final words of the peace prayer of St. Francis. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. This is wonderful. I have chills, everybody. And so we'll
Thank
be
you so
signing
much.
off. Thank you, WCEG, for allowing us to present this marvelous presentation, and you'll be able to find it on Facebook and on WCEG's network.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.
Good day.